The Lie of Endless Potential, Why You Don't Need to Be Everything, written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. Some lies don't shout. They whisper. And the most dangerous ones are the ones wrapped in compliments. You have so much potential. At first it feels like power, a spark, a prophecy. But soon, it becomes a leash. Because when the world tells you that you can be anything, it rarely teaches you how to be something, fully, deeply, and well. We've mistaken open-endedness for empowerment. We've built lives around possibility instead of purpose, mistaking motion for meaning. The result? A generation not lazy or entitled but tired. Not from doing too little but from doing too much, all at once. We call it ambition, hustle, growth, but beneath it is often something else, a quiet panic that we're wasting our one chance to be everything we could be. We flit from one project to the next, multitask through identity, and curate digital personas like shifting outfits, each new opportunity another branch to climb. But growth doesn't come from climbing every tree in the forest. It comes from planting yourself in one place long enough to grow fruit. John Maxwell once said, "You cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. It's a statement of precision, of clarity, of courage." Because in a world of worshipping options, the ability to prune is radical. This book is not about settling, it's about choosing. Not a lesser life, but a focused one, a meaningful one. One defined not by its width, but by its depth. You'll find reflection and challenge, stories and truths. And, most importantly, permission, not to become more, but to become one thing on purpose. If you've ever felt the anxiety of not doing enough, even when you're doing everything, this book is for you. If you've ever been paralyzed by choice, haunted by paths not taken, or torn between 1,000 half-lived identities, this book is for you. It's time to close some doors. To say no with strength. To release the myth of endless potential, and in doing so, discover something rare in today's world, a life with roots. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Burden of Being Everything. You were handed a gift, or at least that's what they called it. You can be anything you want, they said, with the warm, encouraging glow of limitless futures shining in their eyes. And you believed them. Why wouldn't you? The world opened up like a giant department store of identities, and you wandered the aisles, dazzled and indecisive. Doctor, designer, activist, adventurer, creator, CEO, parent, traveler, athlete, leader. Aisles upon aisles of futures you could try on. But no one told you the weight of carrying them all. Like a child clutching every balloon at the fair, the more you hold, the harder it is to move. Each one beautiful. Each one promising something vital, and yet, each one tugging in a different direction. The gift of endless potential quietly becomes a burden you carry into every decision, every comparison, every moment of stillness. It's the whisper that says, you could be doing more. It's the hum behind your exhaustion, the guilt stitched into your ambition. This burden is invisible, yet heavy, because it's not just about what you can do, it's about what you should. And in a world that celebrates multitaskers, polymaths, and personal brands, the pressure is unspoken but relentless. If you're not doing everything, are you even trying? Underneath it all is a dangerous lie, that worth comes from being limitless. You chase this illusion, not out of arrogance, but out of fear. Fear that choosing one thing means failing all the others. Fear that someone else is outpacing you on a path you never even started. Fear that by committing, you might commit to the wrong thing. So you hedge your life, you dabble, you keep doors open, you stay available, and in doing so, you dilute your presence, your power, your purpose. This is not laziness. This is not lack of ambition. This is the paralysis of possibility. And it's exhausting. You start to wonder why everything feels so fragmented, why no effort goes deep, why your schedule is full but your soul feels thin, why, despite doing so much, you feel like you're living in the shallow end of your own life. Here's the truth, you were never meant to be everything. You are not a Swiss Army knife. You are a blade, meant to be honed, sharpened, used with intention. The lie of endless potential says that power lies in versatility. But real power, it lies in precision, or in depth. In saying no to the 99 so you can say yes to the one that matters. Imagine the relief of this. Not failure, not loss, but release. What if your exhaustion isn't from doing too much wrong, but from doing too much right, all at once? This book is not about minimizing your ambition. It's about focusing it. It's not about closing doors out of fear, but out of wisdom. It's about making peace with your unchosen path so you can walk your chosen one with courage. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore what it means to trade breadth for depth, to prune not out of lack but for growth, to stop trying to be everything and finally become your thing. You'll learn that focus is not failure, and commitment is not a cage. It begins here, with the courage to let go of the burden you were never meant to carry. Next, we'll expose the myth of the Swiss Army life, and why your usefulness isn't in being many things, but in being exactly what you are, on purpose. Chapter 2. The Myth of the Swiss Army Life. There's something comforting about a Swiss Army knife, compact, versatile, ready for anything. In a single grip, you hold a blade, a screwdriver, a corkscrew, tweezers, a toothpick. It's a survivalist dream, prepared, adaptable, efficient. So it's no surprise we've started seeing ourselves the same way. We curate resumes, social media profiles, and personal brands like toolkits. Graphic designer by day, wellness coach by night, blogger, speaker, strategist, creator. We build identities with collapsible parts, ready to pivot, ready to reinvent. It looks admirable, modern, empowered. But beneath the polish lies a quiet erosion of identity. The myth of the Swiss Army life says that value comes from being useful in many ways, that the more tools you can offer, the more indispensable you become. It teaches you to be flexible, not focused, adaptable, not anchored, but in practice, it often leads to dilution, not distinction. You become a generalist in a world that rewards depth. There's a reason a chef doesn't use a Swiss Army knife in the kitchen. There's a reason a surgeon wouldn't. Not because it isn't useful, but because usefulness isn't the same as mastery. You were not meant to be folded into parts. You were meant to be sharp in one direction. When you try to live like a Swiss Army knife, constantly toggling between identities, ambitions, and expectations, something starts to fray. You second-guess decisions. You overcommit. You say yes to things that don't align, not out of desire, but out of obligation or fear. Fear of disappointing. Fear of missing out. Fear of being labeled as limited. But let's flip the script. What if limitation isn't weakness? What if it's clarity? The world doesn't need more people who can do many things moderately well. It needs people who are willing to go deep, who choose excellence over optionality. The kind of people who don't panic at the thought of not being everything, because they know who they are and what they're for. Consider the violinist who practices the same bow movement for hours. The coder who rewrites the same function until it's elegant. The teacher who refines a single lesson plan until it sings. These are not acts of limitation, they are acts of devotion. The truth is, you can't give your all to everything, you weren't designed to. And pretending otherwise is a fast track to burnout. Multitasking doesn't multiply your impact, it fractures it. You're left scattered, not expanded. And ironically, the more you try to prove your value through variety, the harder it is for anyone to see what you're really about. Being good at many things might open doors, but it's being great at one thing that gets you invited inside. This isn't about boxing yourself in. It's about stepping fully into your lane. It's about recognizing that your impact doesn't come from being widely available, it comes from being deeply rooted. The tree that grows tall is the one that planted itself firmly. If you've been living like a Swiss Army knife, trying to keep all your blades polished and ready, maybe it's time to ask, which one were you meant to be? Because when you find that one, everything else doesn't become worthless, it becomes unnecessary. Next, we'll explore the parable of the crowded garden, and why scattered effort, no matter how passionate, can never produce deep fruit. Chapter 3. Seeded and Scattered. Imagine a patch of fertile soil, rich, dark, alive with potential. You kneel with a bag of seeds: tomatoes, sunflowers, lavender, pumpkins, basil, corn, roses. Each one promises something unique: fragrance, winegrinds, flavor, beauty, nourishment. In your eagerness, you plant them all, row after row. You press seeds into the earth, not just a few, but dozens. You water. You wait. You tend them as best you can, moving quickly from one end of the patch to the other. Days pass. Then weeks. Something begins to grow, but not much. Weak stems, sparse leaves, nothing strong, nothing fruitful. You did everything right, except for one thing: you spread your effort too thin. This is how many people live, with a soul like fertile soil and a pocket full of dreams. So they plant them all, every interest, every opportunity, every ambition. They say yes, again and again, hoping something will take root. But the soil of life isn't infinite. It has limits. And when you divide your energy across too many seeds, none can grow deep. This isn't a failure of ambition. It's a failure of focus. The modern world sells you the myth that more equals better. More projects, more skills, more platforms, more exposure. But every yes is an energy expense. Every new venture demands attention, time and heart, and your attention, like soil, cannot nourish endless growth. You might tell yourself, I'll try everything and see what works. But life isn't a buffet. It's a harvest. What you reap depends on what you're willing to water consistently. Dipping in and out of commitments, testing a dozen passions, saying yes to every invitation may feel productive. But busyness is not growth. Motion is not progress. The truth is, something always suffers. The dream that needed your full devotion gets partial attention. The path that required sacrifice is crowded out by lesser options. The skill that might have flourished with time and grit becomes just another seed left unattended. Over time, this fragmentation leads not only to burnout but to a subtle erosion of identity. You're busy but unfulfilled. Involved but unanchored. And worst of all, you begin to doubt your capacity, not because you lack it, but because you never concentrated on it. Focus feels risky. It feels like gambling on one seed when you could have planted 20. But mastery, true fulfillment, doesn't come from spreading wide. It comes from digging deep. From giving one thing the attention, space, and sacrifice it needs to become something real. There's a reason vineyards grow grapes and not watermelons. The soil, the climate, the caretaking, it's all aligned toward a singular yield. That doesn't make other crops bad. It makes the vineyard wise. In the same way, wisdom isn't about hoarding possibilities. It's about selecting the one that aligns with your deepest purpose, and then pruning everything that competes. That's how excellence emerges. So ask yourself, what seeds have I planted out of fear of missing out? What have I neglected because I tried to grow too much at once? What deserves more of me, and what needs to be released? In the next chapter, we'll confront the illusion of infinite doors and explore how too many options don't liberate us, they paralyze us. Sometimes the bravest act isn't planting more, it's choosing where to root. Chapter 4. The Tyranny of Options. Picture yourself in a hallway lined with doors. Each one is labeled with a different life. Behind one, the artist. Another, the entrepreneur. Another, the parent, the professor, the world traveler, the healer, the activist. Some doors glow with curiosity. Others hum with unfinished dreams. You pace, staring at knobs, listening for clues. But here's the twist. Every time you reach for a handle, you glance back at the others. What if that one was better? What if the real you is behind another? So you wait. And wait. And wait. This is the tyranny of options. We've been conditioned to believe that freedom means having every door open. The more choices, the more empowered we feel. It's why we delay decisions, chase side paths, and treat commitments like temporary contracts. But freedom without direction becomes its own kind of prison. Too many options don't empower us, they immobilize us. It's called decision fatigue. Psychologists describe it as the mental drain caused by an overload of choices. The more options you juggle, the harder it becomes to choose anything. You get stuck in cycles of overthinking, procrastination, and regret, not because you're indecisive, but because you've been taught to keep all your options just in case. We romanticize potential, not realizing that unchosen paths can quietly sabotage the one we're meant to walk. The weight of what could be becomes heavier than the value of what is. And so we stand in the hallway, paralyzed by possibility. But doors don't stay open forever. Time moves, energy wanes. The hallway becomes a loop. You start to wonder if you'll ever walk through any door with conviction. You peek behind some dabble retreat. You feel productive for sampling, but nothing feels like home. Meanwhile, others who dared to choose are building lives behind their doors. Not because they were more talented, but because they had the courage to decide. The paradox is this: the more you fear choosing wrong, the more likely you are to choose nothing at all. But clarity rarely comes before commitment. Most revelations arrive after you've stepped inside. Meaning doesn't greet you in the hallway, it finds you in the doing, the enduring, the refining. Waiting for certainty before choosing is like waiting for a fire to start before striking the match. You cannot discover who you are by standing still. Freedom, real freedom, comes not from having infinite doors, but from closing the ones that don't lead to who you're becoming. It's not loss, it's focus. The act of choosing isn't a betrayal of your other selves, it's an act of devotion to your truest one. This isn't a call to rash decisions. It's a call to honest ones. Ask yourself, which doors have I kept open out of fear, not desire? What am I waiting for? More time, more signs, more approval? What would happen if I stopped orbiting and started moving? Because choosing isn't the end of your potential, it's the beginning of your power. In the next chapter, we'll examine the seductive pull of potential itself, and why being told you can be anything is often the very reason you feel like nothing. The hallway is only prison if you stay in it. Let's keep walking. Chapter 5: The Seduction of Potential. Potential is a praise that sounds like a promise. It's the gleam in someone's eye when they say, "You could be great." It's the compliment that feels like a prophecy. You're going places. You have something. Don't waste it. And so begins the seduction. You carry this word like a badge and a burden. You're not just someone, you're someone with potential, which means the clock is ticking. Expectations are mounting. Potential is a mountain you haven't yet climbed, but everyone's watching to see if you will. It doesn't matter what you've done. It matters what you could do. You learn to measure your worth not by action, but by possibility. And that's a dangerous metric. Because potential never demands proof, it only demands pressure. The lie hidden inside potential is subtle but sharp. Until you fulfilled it, you are not enough. So you chase it. You chase it through accolades, pivots, and reinventions. Every new role, every new venture, is a shot at finally making good on the praise. But potential is slippery. Just when you think you've caught it, it shifts. What was once impressive becomes expected. The bar rises. Again. Because potential has no finish line, only the thread of wasted promise. That's how it keeps you running. That's how it keeps you afraid to rest, to choose, to settle into one identity. What if that identity is less than what you could have been? What if there's something bigger, shinier, better, just one pivot away? But here's the truth: potential is not purpose. Purpose is not a maybe. It's not a someday. It's not a vague possibility floating in the future. Purpose is real, present, chosen. It is the point at which your effort meets intention. And it begins the moment you stop measuring yourself by what you could do and start committing to what you are doing. The seduction of potential is that it feels limitless. But human energy isn't. Time isn't. Attention isn't. Living in the shadow of your own imagined greatness eventually leads to disillusionment. You begin to feel like a disappointment in progress, simply because you haven't yet become what others, or you, imagined. But maybe the problem isn't that you're failing your potential. Maybe the problem is that you're still serving it. Potential is a theory. Purpose is practice. Potential says, one day. Purpose says, today. And if you live only for the future version of yourself, you miss the only self that actually exists, the one you're building right now. Letting go of potential feels like betrayal. It feels like shrinking. But it's not. It's prioritizing. It's saying, I don't have to become everything. I have to become something, on purpose, with depth, with love. You don't need to prove your potential. You need to live your life. This chapter isn't about giving up on growth. It's about redefining it. Growth isn't chasing every possible version of you. It's becoming more of the truest version, and that requires focus, choice, and often, sacrifice. Ask yourself, am I making decisions to fulfill a promise someone made about me, or to live a life I actually want? What parts of me are here now, waiting to be built, while I chase shadows of who I might have been? In the next chapter, we'll make a decisive turn. away from scattered ambition toward chosen mastery, because once you stop chasing potential, you can finally build something real. Chapter 6: Depth over Breadth. A river that spreads too wide becomes a swamp, still water stagnant with no direction. But when the river narrows, it gains force. It carves canyons, powers mills, shapes landscapes, not because it holds more water, but because it knows where to flow. This is the power of depth. We are taught to diversify, try many things, keep our options open, to be well-rounded. But in our rush to be broadly capable, we forget the value of being deeply rooted. We mistake activity for impact, exposure for expertise, and we stretch ourselves thin in the name of being versatile. But versatility without depth leads to surface-level living. There's a reason the most respected voices in any field are rarely the ones doing everything. They're the ones doing one thing exceptionally well. The artist who paints 1,000 variations of the same theme, the writer who obsesses over every sentence, the coach who teaches the same drill for decades, refining it until it becomes almost sacred. Depth takes time. It demands repetition. It asks you to stay, and staying feels like suffocation when you've been taught that momentum equals meaning. The idea of focusing on one lane, one craft, one calling can feel like a limitation. But in truth, it's an invitation to mastery, to significance, to clarity. The world is full of talented people who never go deep. They skip from project to project, passion to passion, leaving a trail of nearly finished dreams. Not because they lack ability, but because they fear boredom, failure, or being boxed in. But mastery is forged in the tension between repetition and revelation. It's built when you show up again and again, not because it's glamorous, but because it matters. When you choose to go deep, you begin to see things others miss. Patterns, nuance, hidden beauty. Insight that only reveals itself after the 1,000th hour. There's a cost to this, of course. You'll miss out on other things. You'll say no more than yes. You'll watch others sprint ahead on different paths. But depth pays dividends that breadth never can. It builds a reputation. It builds trust. It builds legacy. In a distracted world, depth is a rebellion. And it's not just about craft, it's about relationships, character, purpose, being present, fully, in one place. Whether it's a career, a cause, a family, or a mission, depth says, I am here, on purpose, with my whole self. Breadth is what gets you started. Depth is what makes you unforgettable. You don't need to dabble in everything to be impressive. You need to commit to something that matters and have the discipline to endure when it stops feeling exciting. Because that's when the real growth begins, not when things are novel, but when they're known and you still choose to keep digging. Ask yourself, where have I been skating across the surface, afraid to dive? What might happen if I stayed longer, dug deeper, gave more? Because the life you're longing for isn't hiding in the next new thing. It's waiting beneath the surface of the one you keep returning to. In the next chapter, we'll look at what it means to prune, not as a loss, but as a path to growth. Because the more focused your energy becomes, the more alive your purpose gets. Chapter 7: The Art of Pruning. A gardener walks through a vineyard with a knife in hand. Not to destroy, but to shape. She studies each vine, looking not just at what is growing, but at what shouldn't be. A healthy vine can produce many branches, but left unchecked, those branches compete for light, for nutrients, for space. So she cuts, not recklessly, intentionally. She prunes so that the fruit that remains can flourish. Pruning is not punishment. It is wisdom in motion. Yet in life we resist it. We cling to every branch of our identity, every opportunity, every relationship, every possibility. We convince ourselves that letting go means failure or waste. But without pruning, even the best things in our lives begin to suffocate under their own weight. The art of pruning is about learning to release what is good so that what is essential can thrive. Modern culture glorifies the full plate. We are praised for juggling, admired for multitasking, envied for being involved. But what we don't see is the cost: shallow roots, unfinished work, divided minds. We become experts in doing many things decently, but nothing deeply. At some point, the question is no longer, what can I add, but what must I remove? This is the work of focus. And it's not easy. Some branches you prune will scream. Some will plead for just a little more time. Some are deeply connected to your identity, roles you've played, talents you've nurtured, and paths you once loved. But if they are crowding your clarity, they must go. Letting go doesn't mean they weren't valuable. It means their season has passed. Pruning is about trust. Trusting that less really can be more. That you don't need every door, every skill, every accolade. That growth doesn't always mean expansion. Sometimes it means refinement. The tree that reaches upward first grows downward, and it does so by shedding. In practical terms, pruning might look like canceling a project that no longer aligns, saying no to a collaboration that pulls you sideways, quitting a hobby that once gave joy but now causes stress, turning down good opportunities so you can pursue great ones. It's the discipline of subtraction in a world obsessed with addition. The fear, of course, is that pruning leaves us with nothing. But ask any gardener, after the cut comes the bloom. When you remove the excess, you make room for excellence. When you stop spreading yourself thin, you give your best efforts the space to become meaningful. And when you prune from a place of purpose, what remains is not just enough, it's alive. Ask yourself, what am I holding on to out of habit, not conviction? What in my life is merely growing, not flourishing? What must be cut, not because it's dead, but because it's distracting? You cannot become everything you could be, but you can become exactly what you were meant to be, and that requires a blade, not a bouquet. In the next chapter, we'll challenge the idea of balance, the well-intentioned myth that you can juggle it all if you just try hard enough. Because sometimes trying to keep everything in place is the very thing keeping you from peace. Chapter 8: The False Idol of Balance. Balance sounds noble. It promises peace. The image is serene, a tightrope walker gliding effortlessly, each footfall steady, each sway corrected with grace. We are told to aim for this: work-life balance, emotional balance, ambition, and rest in perfect harmony. But beneath the elegance lies an impossible standard. Balance, as it's commonly sold, implies that all parts of your life can coexist without conflict. That with enough discipline you can give equal energy to your career, your relationships, your health, your passions, your personal growth, your rest, your responsibilities. Like a scale with endless arms, each side weighted just right. But life doesn't work in equal portions. It moves in seasons, in demands, in disruptions. Sometimes your work will need more. Sometimes your relationships will. Sometimes your health will cry out. Trying to keep every category perfectly level at all times isn't balance. It's burnout dressed in wisdom's clothing. The myth of balance sets you up to feel like you're always failing at something. If you're succeeding at work, you feel guilty at home. If you're present with family, you worry about falling behind. If you rest, you feel lazy. If you hustle, you feel absent. No matter what you choose, another part suffers. And so balance becomes a burden, not a blessing. What you need isn't balance. It's clarity. Clarity doesn't ask you to do everything. It asks you to do the right things, for right now. It understands that life is dynamic, not static, that focus must shift depending on the moment, the mission, the need. It gives you permission to prioritize without apology. Because trying to give everything your best attention is a recipe for giving nothing your full presence. Real peace doesn't come from juggling perfectly. It comes from setting things down, from deciding what can wait, what can go, and what gets your deepest yes. Peace comes when you trade the illusion of control for the wisdom of choice. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibilities. It means acknowledging that excellence is directional, not universal. You cannot be fully devoted to 10 things at once, but you can be deeply devoted to the few things that matter most in this season. Consider a symphony. Not every instrument plays at the same volume, or for the same length. Some rest while others crescendo. But the conductor knows the score, knows what to bring forward, what to silence, what to sustain. That is not balance. That is intention. You are the conductor of your own life. Stop striving to play all parts simultaneously. Instead, ask, what deserves my volume right now? What must take the lead? What must soften so something else can soar? This is how you stop measuring your days by how well you juggled and start measuring them by how well you lived. Ask yourself, where am I chasing balance and feeling perpetually behind? What would happen if I stopped trying to manage everything equally and instead focused on what matters most right now? In the next chapter, we'll explore how to make peace with the paths you don't take, and why releasing unlived lives isn't a loss, but liberation. Because once you stop idolizing balance, you can start building rhythm. Chapter 9. Unchosen doesn't mean unloved. There's a peculiar ache that comes with not choosing. A silent grief for the paths you didn't take, the dreams you didn't pursue, the versions of yourself that never came to be. We don't talk about it much, but it lingers, in quiet moments, in comparison, in the stories we tell ourselves about who we might have been. This is the weight of the unchosen life. When you finally commit to one direction, you close the door on others. Not because they weren't worthy, but because you can't be in all places at once. And while the culture of potential urges you to believe you can juggle it all, reality reminds you otherwise. But here's the truth: you don't have to grieve every unlived life as a failure. Not choosing everything isn't rejection. It's reverence. Imagine a museum curator selecting pieces for an exhibit. The curator walks through a warehouse of masterpieces, sculptures, paintings, artifacts. Each beautiful, each with value. But only a few can be displayed. The curator doesn't discard the others with disdain. They're not forgotten. They're simply not for this particular gallery, this particular moment. You are the curator of your life. You can acknowledge the beauty of a path without needing to walk it. You can respect an ability without needing to monetize it. You can honor a dream by letting it remain just that, a dream. Not every spark must be a fire. Not every possibility must be lived to be valid. The lie of endless potential says you betray yourself when you don't do it all. But in truth, you betray yourself when you refuse to choose, because without choice there is no meaning, only noise. There's a profound maturity in letting go with love, when you allow certain parts of yourself to rest, not because they weren't real, but because something else calls louder. You make space for depth. You offer your full self to one pursuit, one purpose, without the shadow of 100 what-ifs haunting your steps. And something beautiful happens when you do: peace. Peace comes when you stop living like every interest must be a career, every talent must be showcased, and every dream must be proven. It comes when you understand that some parts of you are private, some are seasonal, some are sacred simply because they exist inside you, not because they are ever displayed. You're not abandoning those unchosen selves. You're thanking them. Thank you, painter self, for reminding me of beauty. Thank you, traveler self, for showing me curiosity. Thank you, entrepreneur self, for teaching me courage. Now I walk forward with your gifts, even if I don't walk your path. This is not scarcity thinking. It's soulful stewardship. It's knowing that your energy, time, and devotion are finite, and treating them with respect. It's trusting that the life you're building is not a compromise, but a commitment. Ask yourself, what unlived life am I mourning that might not be mine to live? What dreams do I need to release, not with regret, but with gratitude? Because the unlived life isn't the enemy, it's a companion on the road to clarity. In the next chapter, we'll confront the pivotal choice, the one loud, defiant yes that gives shape to everything else. Because once you stop fearing what you've left behind, you're free to walk fully into what's ahead. Chapter 10. Choosing your one wild yes. Life is a field of open hands, each offering something shiny: opportunity, approval, adventure, security. You walk among them, eyes wide, heart restless, wondering which one to take. But the longer you look, the harder it gets, because choosing one means releasing the others. This is the fear that haunts modern ambition, that in choosing one thing fully you abandon too much. But real freedom doesn't come from holding everything. It comes from giving yourself wholly to something that matters. The one wild yes, it's not just a decision, it's a declaration. It's the moment you stop managing your identity like a resume and start living like a whole person. When you choose your yes, truly choose it, the noise quiets, the pressure to perform every role fades, because now your energy has a direction, your passion has a place to land. But how do you know what deserves that yes? It's not always the loudest thing, not the trendiest. Not even the thing that makes the most money or draws the most applause. The one wild yes is often the thing that keeps whispering long after others have shouted and left. It's the idea that returns even when you try to bury it, the dream that feels more like a calling than a choice. It asks more of you, and offers more in return. Saying yes like this requires courage. It means you'll disappoint some people, you'll leave some opportunities on the table. You'll risk failure in a deeper way, because you've finally decided what success looks like to you. But the cost of not choosing is higher. When you live without a defining yes, you become a reactive being. You fill your time with other people's priorities. You start things you don't finish. You lose yourself in perpetual motion without direction. Fulfillment never comes. Not because it's out of reach, but because your hands are too full of half-lived lives to receive it. The wild yes changes that. It narrows your focus but expands your power. It simplifies your choices but deepens your meaning. It grounds you, anchors you, clarifies you. It's the difference between drifting and building, and it doesn't have to be permanent. Seasons change. Callings evolve. But in each season, one yes must rise above the rest. Otherwise, you'll spend your life tasting everything but digesting nothing. Look back at the moments when you felt most alive, most true. What were you doing? Who were you serving? What part of you lit up not from praise but from purpose? Trace the threads. Often, your one wild yes has already been whispering, it's just been buried under noise. When you find it, honor it. Build around it. Let it cost you something. Because the best things always do. Ask yourself, what have I been circling, afraid to commit? What dream do I keep coming back to, even when logic says no? What part of me is asking, not for more options, but for permission to begin? In the next chapter, we'll explore what it means to grow downward, not outward. To plant roots so deep in your chosen path that even the strongest winds can't shake you, because once you've chosen your yes, it's time to dig in. Chapter 11, Roots, Not Wings. Wings are romantic. They suggest freedom, motion, limitless sky. We praise people for soaring, for flying high, for rising above. We dream of having wings ourselves, to escape, to explore, to elevate. But flight is fleeting. Real strength is found not in how far you can float, but in how deeply you can root. A tree doesn't envy the bird. It doesn't race to the next branch or chase the horizon. It sinks into the earth. It reaches down before it reaches up. And in doing so, it becomes immovable, resilient, a source of shelter and fruit. This is the quiet power of rootedness. We live in a culture obsessed with motion, new roles, new ideas, new platforms. The person who pivots fastest is seen as innovative. The one who stays is seen as stagnant. But speed is not always growth. Movement is not always evolution. Sometimes the most radical act is to stay put and go deep. Rooting yourself into a craft, a cause, a community requires patience. There are no quick wins, no viral applause. The rewards are slow and subterranean. But they're also the only ones that last. Roots stabilize you. When storms come, and they always do, it's not the most talented or most connected who endure. It's the most grounded. The ones who've done the slow, invisible work of digging in, who've stayed when others quit, who've nurtured depth when others chase novelty. Rootedness gives you identity. When you commit to a path, it begins to shape you. You develop rituals. You build resilience. You start to be known, not for dabbling, but for mastery. You become part of something larger than yourself. And most importantly, roots give you reach. It's ironic. In trying to stay open to everything, we limit our growth, but when we choose to narrow, we expand. Like a tree, your branches only stretch as far as your roots will support. The deeper you go, the more you can hold, the more you can give, the more you can become. Of course, rooting comes with risk. You might fear wasting time, fear choosing wrongly, fear being left behind by those who keep moving. But every path comes with fear. The difference is that rootedness transforms it. It says, yes, I am afraid, but I will stay and build anyway. It's the long game. The kind of life that doesn't just shine for a season but becomes shade for others long after you're gone. Rooting doesn't mean rigidity. Trees grow, they adapt. They shift with the seasons, but their essence remains. Their place, their purpose, their presence, it endures. Ask yourself, where in my life have I chased wings when I needed roots? What might happen if I stopped looking for the next opportunity and instead poured everything into where I already am? The world doesn't need more people flying through phases. It needs people who stay, who build, who bear fruit. In the final chapter, we'll bring everything together: the doors you've closed, the focus you've chosen, the depth you've pursued, and discover the surprising freedom found not in spreading wider, but in living deeper. Chapter 12. The Freedom of the Closed Door. We're taught to love the open door, the invitation, the possibility, the unclaimed potential just waiting on the other side. Open doors are celebrated. They speak of opportunity, adventure, choice. But what they rarely offer is peace. An open door asks a question, a closed door gives an answer. It's counterintuitive, but freedom often arrives the moment a door clicks shut. Not because the other side held nothing worth wanting, but because your life no longer needs to stretch itself trying to fit through it. There's a kind of clarity that only commitment brings, a kind of rest that only follows a decision. When you choose, truly choose, you liberate yourself from the haunting chorus of what ifs. You no longer need to justify your path to every voice in your head. You no longer waste energy scanning horizons for alternate routes. You are here, fully, finally. The closed door doesn't limit your life, it defines it. Think of an artist with a blank canvas. The possibilities are infinite and paralyzing. But once she makes the first brushstroke, a shape begins to emerge. With each choice, the options narrow, but the vision becomes clearer. What once was endless becomes meaningful. The same is true for you. When you stop trying to keep every door open, you begin to live a life with shape, with texture, with purpose. Not a life filled with everything, but a life filled with the right things. And here's the beautiful part. When you close a door, you don't just shut out distraction. You make room for depth, for mastery, for presence. You give yourself the chance to love something fully, to know it intimately, to become someone remarkable within it. People fear regret when they choose, but often, regret grows in the soil of indecision. It festers in the space between paths. You look back not with sorrow over what you lived, but with emptiness from what you never committed to. The closed door is not a loss. It's a gift. It says, this is the path. Walk it well. And no, it won't be perfect. There will be doubts, detours, and dry seasons. But clarity isn't about comfort, it's about direction. You won't need to be everything. You'll just need to be faithful to your one thing. This is the quiet rebellion of a focused life. While the world clamors for more, you will be content with less, but deeper. While others chase breadth, you will chase meaning. While the masses applaud the open-ended, you will quietly close the door and get to work. And that's where real freedom begins, not in unlimited choices, but in chosen constraints, not in scattered energy, but in precise intention, not in being everything, but in being wholly, unapologetically, purposefully yourself. Ask yourself, what doors have I been afraid to close, and what might open within me once I do? What kind of life could I build, not with endless options, but with focused devotion? You were never meant to be a forest. You were meant to be a tree. Stand tall, dig deep, let go of the noise, and grow, not everywhere, but right here. The world doesn't need your potential, it needs your presence. Your life begins now, not when all the doors are open, but when you finally choose to walk through one and close it behind you. Take care and be well.